This truth is shaking the world up. Let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem
This truth.
Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is These That Have Turned the World Upside Down. And pretty much I got the idea for this lesson from the video I was watching, the elder apostles and the bishop doing the Saturday speaking. I actually watched the whole thing this morning, and towards the end of the lesson, this is where they mentioned. I don't remember exactly who said it, but one of them said, mentioned about the scripture with the apostle Paul, and how these men turned the world upside down, and it got me to thinking about how this truth, to the world, as insignificant as it may seem to them, or as insignificant as they want to make it, make the world believe that we are, this truth is pretty much shaking and rattling and turning everything upside down that they turned this a certain way, because we know through the Spirit, when you go to Revelation, the 20th chapter, that the whole world, was put into deception once, the Renaissance came into play, because that was the change of guard, so to speak, from Jake ruling throughout what's known as so-called Europe or Asia, which is, same thing. Elder Malcolm goes into that, to what became the Renaissance. And at that time, you had a lot of different painters, sculptors, and different individuals that were going throughout, so-called Europe and defacing the images of the so-called black, the so-called black images that were up, brown skin images that were up of the Heavenly Father, his son, Yahushai, which is his son, the angels, the Israelites, so on and so forth. And, now that form of Christianity, so-called, has been established on the earth for the last 500 plus years, this truth, which they say is insignificant, but it's stirring a lot of controversy and it's shaking the whole world up, and that goes all the way back to Yahushai first and foremost, because his teachings or his doctrine, which he got from the Father, was shaking up the status quo of the times. Now, when we look up this word status quo, right? Status quo, right? Okay, they got a band called that. Let's just put in meaning. It says the existing state of affairs, especially regarding social or political issues, and in this case, so-called religious. So it's an existing state of affairs. So as you go back 2,000 years ago, there was a certain status quo that existed, within Israel back then, and it was pretty much kept by the sects of that time. When I mean sects, I'm talking about sects, like the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the lawyers, the doctors, so on and so forth, which they called the Sanhedrin, all right, which were these different councils, of these men, and they had a status quo, or they had, as it says below that, an existing state of affairs. And when Yahushua came on the scene, he brought a disturbance to that, and they didn't like that. This is why he was persecuted, and this is why eventually they led him to be crucified, which was already prophesied anyway. So he threatened the modern day teaching back then of what was already established. So we're going to read that real quick in Luke 23. We're going to read the first few verses. Luke 23:1. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate. This is dealing with Yahushua after they came and got him at the Garden of Gethsemane, right? It says, and they began to accuse him. Why? Because his teachings were contrary to their teachings. and we get our doctrine from Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So the world has a certain, you know, way, religious way about them that they're conducting themselves, which is what they call world Christian view. And our teachings are in direct confliction with the teachings of the world. And this is why you have so many people coming against this truth like it is, because it's, disrupting the daily, lies that have been taught. But this is part of what would happen prior to the Lord coming back. There had to be a revelation first. It says, and they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation. See? So this is what we're accused of perverting the gospel, of teaching something that's contrary to what's acceptable. Okay? And it doesn't matter if it's acceptable to the world. It's not acceptable to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And that's why, as Elder Apostle Tahar was highlighting in his video that he was doing with Pastor Mike, he kept saying, I feel and I don't think and this, that, and the other. Why? Because it's not about what's written. It's about what has already been established. There's a curriculum, and anything that goes against that curriculum, they're trained to fight against them, for massa. And forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Yahushai, a king, or the Messiah, the king, a king. And he is the Messiah. And the thing about it is they knew that a Messiah was supposed to come. And there were certain ones of them that believed that he was the Messiah, but they wouldn't, acknowledge that because they were more concerned with their status that they had than with giving reverence to the truth and the true king, Yahushai. And that's why the Apostle Paul said, everything I have, I count it but dung. That great status that I had a good standing, I had money coming in, I was good. But I gave it all up that I may win Yahushai. And I count it as dung because it ain't nothing in comparison to what I'm going to receive for it. Remember the apostles, which were disciples at the time, they asked the Lord that we gave up everything. So what are we going to get in return? And he said, you had given up homes and wives and children, whatever you gave up, you're going to receive 100-fold in the kingdom of heaven. So the prophets, the teachers, they see the payoff in the future. And they see the corrupt way that this world is, and that's why they'll continue on teaching the word the way it is, because it is the truth, and the truth would be in direct confliction with this world. And how do we know? Because that's what they did to Yahushai. So speaking on these things is going to cause a great persecution against us. That's why you have individuals making fake page accounts, about us, and trying to demonize us because what we teach is contrary to the world views of so-called Christianity. It says, and Pilate asked him, saying, art thou a king, the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, thou sayest it. Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce. Why? Because they're like, nah, we got to get rid of this man. In the book of St. John, the 11th chapter, it says, if we don't do something, the Romans are going to come and take our place, because they've already been placed in this world. They have a particular job. They get a particular amount of money, salary, whatever the case it is, bags, salary, whatever it is, to be the protectors of this fake Christianity that we see today that stems all the way back to the Renaissance. So they were more adamant and more vocal and more, turned up, so to speak, because Yahushua, was stirring up and messing up, their status that they had, and they were like in a desperate state of mind to get rid of him. And they knew that they couldn't do it themselves. So they needed the go ahead from the Romans. And this is why they hired, men and women to come and be false witnesses against the Lord, and none of it worked because it all fell apart. But nevertheless, they did manage to get him crucified because that's prophecy. It says, and they were the more fierce, saying, he stirreth up the people. See, how is he stirring up the people? With the doctrine that he was teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. So Yahweh's doctrine caused a big stir. It caused a big, problem for the leaders of the time, going back 2,000 years ago. And you better believe that these same individuals that were back then are here now, and they're doing the same exact thing. Now, some of those religious leaders out there are, some of them same leaders back then. And then some of these Israelites that know that they're Israelites, some of them are even the same spirits coming back, fighting against this truth like they did 2,000 years ago. So let's go to the main scripture in Acts 17. We're going to start at 1. The point is around 6. It says, now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. All right, this is the Apostle Paul. And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the scriptures. See, he didn't reason out of his own head, his feelings and what he thought and what he felt. He reasoned out of the scriptures. But the thing is that whatever he was teaching, even though he went into the scriptures, they didn't accept it because it was going against the status quo, as we read earlier. It was going against the existing established, religion or religious teachings that they were used to or accustomed at those times. It says, opening and alleging that Yahushua must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Yahushua, whom I preach unto you, is the Messiah. See, he is the Mashiach, or the Mashiach. All right. It says, and some of them believed, see, and consorted with Paul and Silas. So the ones that believed, they were forsaking the old ways and leaning towards what the Apostle Paul and Silas and the men that were with him were teaching. So that caused problems. Why? Because now that's less money for those leaders at the time. That was less money for making idols or whatever situation the Apostle Paul was in. So he was, like they call it, what they call a shit disturber. Like you get this rumbling feeling in your stomach, and that's the indication that you got to hit the bathroom. Or the Apostle Paul was like that shit disturber, like that fiber, that causes your bowels to move, and people were upset because they were, used to the way it was, and they wanted to keep it that way. Why we got to change everything? Why we just can't keep it the same way it was? Inside joke. And of the devout Greeks, which are Israelite foreigners, a great multitude. Why? Because you had at that time, if you understand the history that was going on, you had the Hellenized Jews that were coming back to the fold that were being called Greeks, right? Timothy was one of them. And of the chief women, not a few. So you had a lot of Israelites that were waking up and coming back or coming away from those leaders. So guess what? It's causing their money to dwindle. But the Jews which believed not, and this is the point, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company and set the city on an uproar. Why? Because they were jealous, they were envious. How dare this individual come and disturb, our hustle? How dare he? So they put the whole city in an uproar because they didn't believe in his way, but they believed in their way, which was false. And they didn't want anything to disturb that. So the city was in an uproar. Pretty much a riot broke out. And when the Apostle Paul spoke, riots broke out. Because what he was teaching, whether he was teaching to the Jews or the Israelite foreigners, it was contrary to what they knew. And it stirred up a lot of controversy, a lot of problems. Just like today, what we're teaching, which we're calling significant. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know the scriptures according to them. We don't know anything. We're unlearned. But yet, they still find it, find the time to try to come against us, because this truth is a threat to the world. And assaulted the house of Jason and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found him not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying. So remember, nobles of the nobles, the gates of the nobles. That happened back then, and it's going to happen again today. And today we are pretty much spoken of among the gates of the nobles. You have congressmen and senators and all that know about what's going on, and they talk about what's going on, putting laws together, talking amongst themselves of, we got to re-educate these people because they're ignorant. Pretty much it says, crying, these that have turned the world upside down are come hither also. So these individuals, wherever they go, whatever the status quo is, they're turning it upside down. They're distorting things. They're teaching things which are not, which we're not used to. Like even in, I think it's the same book of Acts 17, if I'm not mistaken, he said, thou bringest strange, doctrines into our ears, or something like that. So when we look up this word upside down, right, it's the word anastatao, which is to stir up, excite, unsettle, to excite tumults and seditions in the state, or uprisings in the state, to upset, unsettle minds by disseminating religious error. So that's what they considered. They considered this truth to be a religious error. So it stirred controversy because they were zealous for what they believed in, but what they believed in was false. Like the Apostle Paul said, they have a zeal of the Most High, but not according to knowledge. And they reject the knowledge of the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, just like they reject it today. And this is what we're witnessing. So that's where there's a great insurrection, so to speak, or a great, onslaught, for lack of better words, against the truth of the Hebrew Israelites, because the wacky-tacky Christians do not have the proper understanding, and they're under the spell of that covering that Esau has over them. But the Lord is stripping that covering away. He's peeling back the curtain. And just like back then, you had some that could see, but you had the majority of them that couldn't see. All right, so let's go from there to Acts 21. Same book. 21 and 28. I started at 27. Paul seized in the temple, see? And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, and like the elder Malcolm always speaks about, you're not going to see the word Europe in the Bible. It's always Asia, because that part of the world really is Asia. And that's why, as he brought out, they call it Eurasia. When they saw him in the temple, meaning the Apostle Paul, stirred up all the people and laid hands on them, said, nah, man, this guy, we got to do something about this guy. He's teaching something contrary to what we know, man. He's messing up our money. He's messing up, the way that the order of things here. Crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people. The same thing they said about Yahushai. And the law, and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, which were Israelite foreigners, and have polluted this holy place, because they considered those Israelites that were Hellenized to be polluted. Not the Hellenistes or Hellenistas, the Hellene Israelites. Because the Hellenistes, even though they spoke the Greek language, they followed the customs of Israel. That's a totally different thing. Right? And it says, for they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, which was an Israelite foreigner from Ephesus, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was what? In an uproar. Once again, a riot broke out. who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. So why was he being beat? For the persecution of the word, because it was contrary to what they were used to. So as the title of the lesson is, These That Have Turned the World Upside Down. Let's get a couple more. Let's see. Same book of Acts. Let's go to the 24th chapter. And the 5th verse, straight to the point. It says, for we have found this man a pestilent fellow. That's dealing with the Apostle Paul. This is after they took him into, the chief captain brought him into the castle and so on and so forth. And then he went, spoke to the people in the Hebrew tongue, and they didn't want to hear it. They heard him for a while, but then they didn't want to hear it. And a mover what? Of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, which goes back to what? Yahushai's teachings. And you better believe that Yahushai's teachings were very well known at that time, but it was spoken against mostly. All right, and same thing today. Yahushai said, don't be amazed, if they have not accepted my word, they ain't going to accept your word. I'm just merely paraphrasing. So let's go from there. Same book, Acts 28. So this truth is stirring up a lot of controversy, a lot of problems for this modern day plantation Christianity. So Acts 28 and 20, I'll start at 21. And they said unto him, we neither received letters out of Judea concerning thee, neither any of the brethren that came showed or spake any harm of thee. But we desire to hear of thee what thou thinkest, for as concerning this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. Same thing today. That's why you have different individuals with different views in the scriptures, Christianity coming against this truth. Even other Israelites coming against it. All right, so let's go from there. Let's go to 2 Timothy. This is one that they brought out, later on in the lesson. Talking about the apostles. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 14. Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. Now you had certain men that followed the apostle Paul and then forsook him. And then they started, making it hard for the apostle Paul to function. Instead of just going back into the world, and leaving the apostle alone so he can teach the word, which they no longer believed in, they just pretty much just started, to badmouth the apostle Paul and badmouth the doctrine that he was teaching, which is the doctrine of Yahushai. It says the Lord reward him according to his works, right? Because as Yahushai said, with thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. Of whom be thou aware also, for he, meaning Alexander the coppersmith, hath greatly withstood our words. So he came and, he pretty much, anything that the apostle Paul taught, he taught against. And you see that with some of these groups, that fall out. Everything that they learn from Great Millstone, they try to teach the opposite of it. So let's see what it says in the NLT. Be careful of him, for he fought against everything we said. NIV, you too should be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposed our message. And that's the same thing that's happening today. You have individuals that are strongly opposing this truth, this knowledge, and especially among them wacky-tacky Christians. Let's go from there. Same book, 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 8. And this is an example in history of the same thing going all the way back to Egypt. So this truth, this message that we have today has always been spoken against. It's not anything new. It's always been spoken against, and it will continue to be spoken against until Yahushua comes back. 2 Timothy 3 and 8. Now, as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. See, so the truth is going to be resisted. And remember, back then, the status quo was, centered around the Pharisees and the Sadducees' teachings, which was based upon tradition and commandments of men. Anything that threatened that, they made it their life's mission to destroy that person or those people and that message, which is what they're trying to do today. So do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the faith, right? Because it wasn't given to them. So if it's not given to them, Yahweh told them, wicked Pharisees and them, you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. See, so if you have a person that's not a part of the elect, this truth is going to be very uncomfortable to them. They're not going to want to hear it. They're going to want it to stop. And if they have something going on that's contrary to what we're teaching, they're going to ramp up even more. But their counsel is going to fail as to where this counsel is not. Now, let's go from there to 1 Kings, going all the way back again in history. 1 Kings, the 18th chapter, and the 17th and 18th verse. This was Elijah that cursed out, Ahab, right? So it says, and it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? That's what they were saying about Yahushua. That's what they were saying about the Apostle Paul, the disciples, the men, the apostles. This is what they were saying about Moses. You see, and the truth and the leadership has always been challenged, has always been spoken against, and it didn't prevail. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house. Why? Because he was worshiping these different idols. And that you have forsaken the commandments of Yahweh Bashem Shai, and thou hast followed Balaam. And that's the same sentiment going all the way up thousands of years into the future, when you had the wicked Pharisees and Sadducees keeping customs and traditions more than reverencing the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bashem Shai. Let's go from there to Jeremiah 38. This is dealing with Jeremiah 38 and 2. It says, then saith Yahweh, he that remaineth in the city shall die by the sword. This is what the message that the Lord gave to Jeremiah to give to the rulers of Israel at the time, by the famine and by the pestilence. But he that goeth forth to the Chaldeans shall live, for he shall have his life for a prey and shall live. Thus saith Yahweh, this city shall surely be given into the hand of the king of Babylon's army, which shall take it. Therefore the princes said unto the king, meaning the top, counselors, the top men, the nobles, said to the king, we beseech thee, let this man be put to death, for thus he weakeneth the hands of the men of war that remain in this city, and the hands of all the people, in speaking such words unto them. For this man seeketh not the welfare of this people, but the hurt. So as you can see, no matter what time period you go in history, the prophets were always persecuted for teaching the word of the Lord, because the word of the Lord was foreign to a lot of these individuals, especially those that were already established as leaders. Okay. Let's go from there to Amos chapter 7 and verse 10. It says, then Amaziah the priest of Bethel said to Jeroboam king of Israel, saying, Amos hath conspired against thee in the midst of the house of Israel. The land is not able to bear all his words. Why? Because he was speaking against it. Just like we're speaking against America, Babylon the Great, just like Yahushua was speaking against, the Roman Empire back then, him being the king, so on and so forth. It's always been a threat. So the message hasn't changed. It's just time periods that changed. All right. So let's go from there to Psalms 146 and verse 9. Yahweh Bashem Shai preserveth the strangers, which are the Israelite foreigners. He relieveth the fatherless and widow, but the way of the wicked he turneth upside down. And that's what's happening. The Lord is turning these devils' world upside down. And this is what we're, witnessing right now. And they're becoming very annoyed. I wath to be bent. See, be crooked, bent, make crooked, pervert, to bend oneself. So basically to turn things really the right side up. Right here, overthrow. And that's what's happening. That's why the Apostle Paul spoke about this truth casting down strongholds. And now the stronghold of plantation Christianity has been around for the last 500 plus years. So this truth that they consider to be new is a threat to the established teachings of this Christian dogma that they have out there. All right, so let's go from there. Let's go to Isaiah 24:1. So the Lord is the one that's stirring this thing up. He's stirring up the controversy. Isaiah 24:1. Behold, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai maketh the earth empty and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. Because the Lord is going to eventually, after so much speaking is done, the Lord is going to judge this place and destroy it and turn everything right side up. So right now the world is being turned upside down by the prophets because it's on a false premise. So the Lord is flipping it back, spiritually flipping it. Inside joke. He's spiritually flipping it back how it's supposed to be, but the world is so used to the old way that they are not willing to accept it. And only the elect are going to accept it. Let's go from there to Psalms. Back to Psalms 82:5. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. So everything is out of course. So now that the Lord is bringing everything back into course, it's causing a disturbance, and the people that are used to the old ways are getting uncomfortable. 2 Ezra 6:28, it says, as for faith, it shall flourish. Corruption shall be overcome, and the truth, which had been so long without fruit, shall be declared. And that's what's happening. And they're getting uncomfortable because of the truth that's being declared. So let's go back. Let's go to, I got two more precepts, Isaiah 29. Isaiah 29:16. It says, surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as a potter's clay. Why? Because the Lord is going to turn it right side up by the mouth of his prophets. Remember, it said he shall reveal them and then shall destroy them. For shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he had no understanding? So the Lord is turning everything right side up. And the turning of things upside down is going to be esteemed. It's going to be known. It's going to be shown that the world has been under a glaze of deception, for lack of better words. And it's going to be strange to most, but the ones that are part of the elect, it's going to be like music to their ears, and they're going to be able to vibe off the song and off the lyrics of the song, because it was already given to them, because it was already sealed in them before the world began. So last precept I have is 2 Ezra 4:28. I'm going to read a couple of verses. It says, but as concerning the things whereof thou askest me, I will tell thee. For the evil is sown, but the destruction thereof is not yet come. So evil has been sown. Deception has been sown, but the end is not yet come. And that's what we're waiting for. And that's why we're looking at the prophecies, which is the measuring stick, of the end times. It says, if therefore that which is sown be not turned upside down, which is the wickedness, and if the place where the evil is sown pass not away. That's why it says that the elements shall melt with fervent heat. If we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. And this world is under a wicked vibration. So righteousness you know, doesn't have a favorable, you know, is not favorable in this society. It says, then cannot it come that is sown with good, which is the kingdom. For the grain of evil seed hath been sown in the heart of Adam, going all the way back to Adam from the beginning, and how much ungodliness hath it brought up unto this time, including this plantation / Renaissance Christianity. That is pure evil, predicated upon white supremacy. And now you have these Israelites that are marinated in that thing, constantly trying to come against it. They don't want to debate, you know, the fine print of the scriptures. They want to debate salvation because they think that when they read the New Testament, the Gentiles are talking about the other nations, and it's not. If you understood the history, you would understand the mystery that those are Israelite foreigners. Then cannot it come that is sown with good. For the grain of evil seed hath been sown in the heart of Adam from the beginning, and how much ungodliness hath it brought up unto this time? And how much shall it bring yet forth unto the time of threshing come, which we're in the time of threshing now? Ponder now by thyself how great fruit of wickedness the grain of evil seed hath brought forth. And when the ears shall be cut down, which are without number, how great a floor shall they fill? Right, and this goes hand in hand with Revelation 14. It speaks about the wine press. So America is going to be this great wine press, or as Elder Pastor always speaks about, this great altar that's going to be sacrificed, and the sacrifices are going to be burnt with fire. So these that have turned the world upside down, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. To the next time I say, Shalom.